Welcome, children, to a beautiful story of hearts and hands. This is a story which is a very beautiful one, and how the conversation goes on. So, it is only through the observations of their fellow passengers that the reader is made aware of the real nature of the relationship between the two men handcuffed to each other. So, this story, Hearts and Hands, is written by William Sidney Potter, whose pen name is O. Henry. In one of the coaches on the eastbound B&M Express, there was a beautiful young lady dressed in elegant taste and surrounded by all the luxurious comforts of an experienced traveler. There was a sudden influx in this train, and among the passengers were two newcomers who were young men. One of handsome presence with a bold, frank countenance and manner, and the other a ruffled, plum faced person, heavily built and roughly dressed. Both these men were searching a seat for themselves. They were handcuffed to each other. As they passed down the aisle of the coach, the only vacant seat offered was a reversed one facing the attractive young woman. Here the linked couple seated themselves. The young woman's glance fell upon them with a distant, swift disinterest. Then, with a lovely smile brightening her countenance and a tender pink tinging her rounded cheeks, she held out a little grey-gloved hand. When she spoke, her voice, full, sweet, and deliberate, proclaimed that its owner was accustomed to speak and to be heard. "Well, Mr. Easton, if you will make me speak first, I suppose I must. Don't you ever recognize old friends when you meet them in the West?" The young man roused himself sharply at the sound of her voice, seemed to struggle with a slight embarrassment, which he threw off instantly, and then clasped her fingers with his left hand. "It's Miss Fairchild," he said with a smile. "Only I'll ask you to excuse the other hand. It's otherwise engaged just at present." The little girl had her eyes on the metal bracelet that was shining on their left hand. Suddenly, the glum-faced man spoke up. "You'll excuse me for speaking, miss, but I see you're acquainted with the marshal here. If you'll ask him to speak a word for me when we get to the pen, he'll do it. And it'll make things easier for me there. He's taking me to Leavenworth prison. It's 7 years for counterfeiting." "Oh," said the girl with a deep breath. Then Mr. Easton spoke up. He said, "The ambassador," said the girl warmly. And Mr. Easton said, "Yes, I had no job except taking the job of a marshal. Money has a way of taking wings into itself. And you know, it takes money to keep step with our crowd in marshalship. Isn't quite as high a position as that of ambassador." The girl was convinced and their chat went on when suddenly the glum-faced man asked Mr. Easton to go to the smoke room. They agreed to each other and then they walked away. There were two passengers just sitting behind Mr. Easton and the marshal. Then they were talking with each other. These passengers, they settled down the aisle, and the two passengers, they were sitting behind. One of them spoke up. "That marshal's a good sort of chap. Some of these Western fellows are all right." The other one said, "Pretty young to hold an office like that, isn't he?" Then exclaimed the first speaker, "Young, why? Oh, didn't you catch on? Say, did you ever know an officer to handcuff a prisoner to his right hand?" Now, with this revelation, the readers are well acquainted with the fact that the glum-faced man was the marshal and Mr. Easton was the prisoner who was being taken to the Leavenworth prison. This revelation of the fact that a marshal never handcuffs his prisoner into the right hand. So this was how the readers were made aware of what was going on. Both the passengers were able to reveal what was going on behind them and how that lady was mistaken. So the two handcuffed men, they went away, and Miss Fairchild was unable to understand who was the real marshal. So later on, it was revealed that the glum-faced man was a marshal and Mr. Easton was the prisoner who was being taken to the Leavenworth prison for counterfeiting. This was a wonderful story, and here is the end of the story. We'll meet again with a new interesting story in our next session. Have a nice day.